Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling a pretty interesting topic.
Yeah.
The idea that President Biden has been maybe kind of sort of operating as a president in name only, or PINO, you know.
I've heard that one floating around.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we've got a really interesting mix of sources for this one. We're going to start with a Reddit thread straight from our conservative.
Oh, wow.
And then we're going to be looking at an opinion piece by Miranda Devine from the New York Post.
Okay. Two pretty different perspectives there.
Yeah, so get ready because this will be interesting.
It's definitely a claim that's been making the rounds. It raises some really important questions about, presidential power leadership in today's world.
Right. Like, what does it actually mean to be in charge
Exactly.
in today's world?
Yeah.
So to kick things off, maybe we can just dig into this whole president in name only concept.
Okay.
What does that even mean?
Well, essentially, the PINO label suggests that while the president might hold the official title and position, the real power lies somewhere else.
Okay.
So think of advisors, unelected officials, maybe even family members.
Oh, wow.
The idea is that these figures are the ones truly shaping policy and making the big decisions.
Okay, so that's a pretty serious accusation.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like it could have huge implications for how we think about, like democracy and accountability.
Yeah.
Like, if the president isn't really calling the shots, who do we hold responsible when things go right or when they go wrong?
Exactly. That's the core of the debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
This PINO concept, it kind of throws a wrench into the whole idea of democratic governance.
Right.
Where we expect our elected leaders to be the ones answering to the people.
Yeah.
If that line of responsibility gets blurred, it can really shake people's trust in the whole system.
Definitely.
Now, Miranda Devine, in her New York Post article, she claims that Biden kind of fits this PINO description, and she uses some specific examples to back it up.
Okay.
Well, for example, the fact that Biden apparently held way fewer cabinet meetings compared to his predecessor.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like a pretty clear sign that he's not as engaged, right?
Well, it's certainly an interesting data point.
Yeah.
Fewer meetings could suggest a less hands-on approach.
Right.
But it could also mean that he trusts his cabinet to handle things more independently.
I see.
We have to remember every president has their own style of leadership.
True. But Devine also mentions things like national security briefings being rescheduled.
Oh, yeah.
Because of Biden's, bad days.
Okay.
And then there's the fact that he seemed to have very limited interaction with the Secretary of Defense, especially during some, pretty tense international situations.
Secretary of Defense Austin, you mean?
Yeah.
He's essentially responsible for overseeing the military and advising the president on all things defense-related.
Right.
So, yeah, the level of interaction between a president and their Secretary of Defense is definitely something worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
But again, limited direct interaction doesn't automatically mean the president's completely out of the loop.
I see.
There could be other forms of communication happening behind the scenes.
Okay, good point. But it's hard to ignore the image of Biden having those super short press conferences on his foreign trips.
Right.
It almost feels like they were trying to limit his exposure.
It's definitely something that caught people's attention.
Yeah.
But we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions based on appearances.
Right.
It could be a whole range of strategic or logistical reasons for those brief interactions.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with a lot of speculation here.
Sure.
Let's shift gears a little bit and see what the folks over on Reddit have to say about all of this.
Okay.
The thread we pulled from Core Conservative is definitely, well, let's just say it's pretty lively.
Okay.
It's important to keep in mind that Or Conservative is, a community with a particular political perspective.
Right.
So the comments you'll find there are likely to reflect that viewpoint.
Sure.
We might see less nuanced analysis and more of a focus on confirming pre-existing beliefs.
Yeah, it's definitely giving off some strong confirmation bias vibes.
Yeah.
A lot of commenters seem convinced that Biden's basically a puppet controlled by some shadowy figures behind the scenes.
Oh, wow.
Some were even throwing out names like Obama and Jill Biden as the masterminds.
Really?
Yeah. It's interesting to see how these narratives take shape, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Speculation can run wild, especially in online communities where people feel free to express their opinions without filters.
Yeah, and it's not just about who's pulling the strings.
Right.
There's a whole other thread in there about the media supposedly covering up Biden's alleged decline.
Oh, really?
Some commenters were practically accusing the press of being complicit in some grand conspiracy.
It's a recurring theme in these types of debates.
Yeah.
Questioning the role of the media, suspecting hidden agendas, wondering who's controlling the narrative.
To be fair to the folks on Reddit, they do raise some valid points.
Sure.
about transparency and accountability. If there are legitimate concerns about a president's ability to do their job, shouldn't those be addressed openly and honestly?
Absolutely. Open dialogue is crucial in a healthy democracy,
Yeah.
but it's just as important to avoid jumping to conclusions based on limited information or
Right.
partisan narratives.
So how do we strike that balance?
Yeah,
How do we have these difficult conversations without falling into the traps of speculation and misinformation?
that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's something we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into Divine's arguments and the evidence she presents in her New York Post article.
Okay.
So let's shift our focus back to her piece and see how she builds her case for Biden as a president in name only.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Devine doesn't just throw out a few random examples.
Right.
She weaves them into a much larger argument, claiming that Biden's alleged decline was already apparent way back during the 2020 campaign.
Okay, that's a bold claim.
Yeah.
It's one thing to observe a president's behavior once they're in office, but it's quite another to suggest that their alleged decline was evident even before they took on the role.
Right. But Devine doesn't shy away from making that argument.
Uh-huh.
She goes on to say that even if we assume Biden wasn't fully aware of everything going on, he was still capable of making some pretty major decisions that, in her view,
Yeah.
had some seriously negative consequences for the country.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. What specific decisions is she referring to?
She specifically points to things like reversing Trump's border policies, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and some of the economic policies that she believes fueled inflation.
Okay.
She's basically arguing that these decisions, whether Biden was fully in control of them or not, have had a detrimental impact on the country.
It's interesting how she links these policy decisions to the PINO idea.
Yeah.
It's almost as if she's suggesting that if Biden wasn't truly in charge, these decisions wouldn't have been made.
Right. It's like she's implying that someone else is calling the shots and pushing policies that wouldn't have been Biden's choice if he were fully in control.
It definitely adds another layer to the whole president in name only debate.
Yeah.
It's not just about whether Biden was mentally capable of fulfilling his duties.
Right.
It's also about whether his decisions were truly his own or whether he was being influenced by outside forces.
And Devine doesn't hold back on placing blame.
Okay.
She argues that both Biden and the Democratic Party as a whole bear responsibility for what she sees as a failure of leadership.
It's worth noting that Devine is an opinion columnist.
Right.
So her analysis is inherently subjective.
Correct.
She's presenting her interpretation of events and using it to advance a particular argument.
Yeah, it's her perspective, but she does bring up one point that's pretty hard to ignore.
What's that?
The 25th Amendment.
Ah, yes, the 25th Amendment, that's a whole other can of worms.
Tell me about it. I mean, I know it's there, but I have to admit I'm a bit fuzzy on the details.
Well, in a nutshell, the 25th Amendment provides a way to remove a president from office
Go.
if they're deemed unfit to serve
Yeah.
due to physical or mental incapacity.
Okay, so it's like a constitutional safety net in case a president becomes unable to do their job.
Yeah, exactly.
But how does it actually work?
Uh-huh.
Could it have realistically been used in Biden's case?
That's where things get complicated.
Okay.
It's not a simple process,
Mm-hmm.
and it's loaded with political implications.
Okay.
To start with, it involves a whole bunch of players.
Okay.
The vice president, a majority of the cabinet, and ultimately Congress.
So it's not like someone can just say, hey, I think the president's not up to it. Let's get rid of him.
Not at all. You need substantial evidence of incapacity, and there has to be a level of consensus that's pretty rare in our highly partisan political environment.
I see.
Devine seems to be arguing that Biden's alleged decline was serious enough to at least consider using the 25th Amendment.
Okay.
But remember, she's presenting her opinion, not a legal or medical assessment.
Right.
Whether Biden's condition met the criteria for invoking the 25th Amendment is a matter of debate. And it would likely require expert testimony and a thorough examination of all the evidence.
So we're left with a lot of questions and no easy answers.
That seems to be a recurring theme today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that's the nature of complex political issues. There's rarely a single truth or a clear-cut solution.
Yeah.
It's about weighing different perspectives, critically evaluating the evidence, and engaging in informed discussions.
Which is exactly what we're doing here.
Exactly.
We've explored this whole president in name only concept. We've dug into the evidence presented in both the New York Post article and that fiery Reddit thread.
Uh-huh.
And we've even touched on the complexities of the 25th Amendment.
That's a lot to process.
I'm already feeling like my brain is doing some heavy lifting.
But that's the whole point of a deep dive, right?
Right.
We're here to challenge our assumptions, explore different viewpoints, and maybe even come away with more questions than answers.
You know what really strikes me is how challenging it is to separate fact from fiction,
Uh-huh.
especially in today's media landscape.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in narratives that confirm our existing beliefs,
Right.
and it takes real effort to step back,
Sure.
consider alternative viewpoints, and really think critically about the information we're consuming.
You've hit the nail on the head that critical thinking is more crucial than ever.
Yeah.
In a world that's overflowing with information, opinions, and sometimes outright misinformation,
Right.
we need to be discerning consumers of information,
Yeah.
always questioning our assumptions and being open to different perspectives.
One thing that I keep coming back to is the potential consequences of having a president who, for whatever reason, might not be fully engaged in the demands of the job. It's a sobering thought, to say the least.
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it raises some profound questions about the balance between a president's personal well-being and their capacity to lead effectively.
It makes me wonder what safeguards are in place to ensure that the country is governed responsibly, regardless of the president's health or their ability to carry out all of their duties.
That's a question that deserves careful consideration.
What do you think?
Well, that's a conversation for another time.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and I think it's time to give our listeners a chance to digest all of this information.
Okay.
We'll pick up this thread in our next installment and delve deeper into some of these unanswered questions.
Sounds like a plan. So until then, keep those thinking caps on, everyone.
Yes?
And we'll see you back here soon for part 2 of our deep dive into the president in name only debate.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive into this whole president in name only debate surrounding President Biden.
Yeah, definitely lots to unpack here.
Yeah, we've, unpacked some pretty intriguing evidence and perspectives so far.
Yeah.
And now it's time to kind of grapple with some of the trickier aspects of this whole discussion.
Tricky's putting it mildly.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're wading into some pretty murky waters here.
Yeah.
Where, the lines between political analysis, medical speculation, and ethical considerations all get really blurry.
Yeah, you're not wrong. One of the recurring themes we keep bumping into is this question of Biden's, cognitive abilities.
Right.
And how they might have impacted his presidency.
Right.
Devine, in her New York Post article, she goes so far as to argue that Biden's alleged decline was already evident during the 2020 campaign.
Yeah, and that's where things get really complicated, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, if there are genuine concerns about a president's mental fitness,
Right.
those concerns should be addressed.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, how do we even begin to have that conversation
Right.
without resorting to armchair diagnoses?
Yeah.
Or even worse, exploiting someone's potential vulnerabilities for political gain.
Yeah, it's a tightrope walk for sure. We need to be incredibly sensitive to both the individual's rights and the broader interests of the nation.
Right.
It's crucial to avoid attributing every misstep or policy decision to a president's age or cognitive state.
Right.
There could be a whole host of other factors at play,
Sure.
political pressures and differing ideologies within the administration. Yeah,
Or simply the complexities of governing in a world that's constantly changing.
it's a good point. I mean, even Divinery acknowledges that Biden had enough good days, as she puts it,
Right.
to make some pretty significant decisions, many of which she happens to disagree with.
Right.
She specifically mentions things like reversing Trump's border policies, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and enacting economic policies that she believes contributed to inflation.
That's a really important point to highlight. Even if we entertain the idea that Biden experienced some level of cognitive decline,
Right.
it doesn't automatically invalidate his decisions or absolve him of responsibility.
Right.
We still need to engage with the substance of those policies,
Yeah.
debate their merits, and hold the administration accountable for their outcomes.
So it's not about making assumptions about Biden's mental state. It's about evaluating the policies themselves.
Exactly. And that brings us back to this broader question of how we assess a president's fitness for office.
Is it purely about their ability to execute specific tasks, or are there other qualities like leadership judgment and temperament that are just as important?
It's like we're trying to define what it even means to be presidential in the 21st century.
Yeah.
The job itself is constantly evolving, and so are our expectations of what a president should be.
And those expectations are often shaped by forces that are completely outside a president's control. Media portrayals, societal trends, the ever-shifting political landscape. It's a lot to navigate.
Yeah, it feels like we're wrestling with a fundamental tension here.
Yeah,
On one side, we have this ideal of a strong, decisive leader
right.
who's always in command.
Hmm.
But on the other side, we have to acknowledge that presidents are human beings just like the rest of us.
Sure.
They have their own strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities.
And those vulnerabilities can be exploited, not just by political opponents, but also by people within a president's own inner circle. That's why it's so crucial to have systems in place to ensure transparency, accountability, and a healthy balance of power.
Okay, so circling back to this president in name only idea,
Mm.
can we ever really know for sure who's pulling the strings behind the scenes?
Yeah.
Are we always going to be left with a certain degree of uncertainty?
That's the nature of power dynamics, isn't it? They can be subtle, complex, and open to interpretation.
Right.
We can analyze the evidence, consider different viewpoints, and try to draw our own conclusions.
Yeah.
But there may never be a definitive answer.
I guess that's part of what makes this whole topic so fascinating. It's like a puzzle with no easy solution.
Absolutely. And it forces us to think critically about the nature of leadership, the role of the media, and the delicate balance between individual rights and the collective good.
It also highlights the importance of being informed and engaged citizens.
Yeah.
We can't just passively absorb information. We have to actively engage with it, question our assumptions, and be willing to change our minds when presented with new evidence or different perspectives.
Couldn't agree more. And that engagement shouldn't be limited to just voting. It's about being active in our communities, speaking up about the issues that matter to us, and holding our elected officials accountable.
So it's not just about figuring out who's calling the shots. It's about taking responsibility for the direction of our own democracy.
Exactly. It's a responsibility we all share, regardless of our political leanings or beliefs.
We've covered some pretty heavy stuff today.
Yeah.
We've talked about the complexities of assessing presidential fitness, the challenges of separating fact from fiction, and the importance of being informed citizens.
Out of all of that, what resonates most with you?
Mm.
What questions are still swirling around in your mind?
You know, I keep coming back to this idea of safeguards.
Okay.
If there are genuine concerns about a president's ability to govern effectively,
Right.
what mechanisms are in place to address those concerns
Mm-hmm.
without creating chaos or undermining the democratic process?
It's the million-dollar question, for sure. It's a question that we'll continue to explore in our next installment.
Okay.
We'll dive into potential solutions, examine historical precedents, and consider how we can ensure both a president's well-being and the effective governance of our nation.
Sounds like we've got even more to unpack.
We do.
I can't wait to dig in.
Me neither. So, until next time, keep those mental gears turning, and we'll see you back here soon for the final part of our deep dive into the president in name-only debate.
Welcome back, everyone, to the final part of our deep dive into this idea of a president in name only.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. We've explored this whole concept and all the questions it raises about, presidential power and accountability
Definitely.
and the foundation of our democracy.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground,
For sure.
from analyzing, the evidence to grappling with those ethical dilemmas of assessing a president's fitness for office.
Yeah, it's been a really thought-provoking discussion.
Yeah, it has.
Now, I think maybe we can shift gears a little bit and talk about potential solutions.
Okay.
If we entertain the possibility that, there might be situations where a president is unable to fully carry out the duties of the office,
Yeah.
what safeguards can we put in place to ensure effective governance and protect the interests of the nation?
Right. It's a question that has puzzled scholars and policymakers for ages.
Right.
We need to strike a delicate balance.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we don't want to create a system where a president can be easily removed,
Right.
based on flimsy evidence or politically motivated accusations.
Right. Exactly.
But on the other hand, we can't ignore the possibility that there might be legitimate circumstances
Yeah.
where a president's ability to lead is compromised.
That's where the 25th Amendment comes into play, right?
You got it.
We touched on it earlier,
We did.
but I think it's worth revisiting.
Yeah.
It's basically a constitutional mechanism for dealing with presidential incapacity. But as we discussed, it's not exactly a simple or straightforward process.
The 25th Amendment is really the most formal and legally defined process we have,
Right.
but it's not without its limitations.
Okay.
The bar for invoking it is intentionally set very high,
Right.
which makes it difficult to apply in situations where a president's incapacity might be gradual or subtle.
Uh-huh.
rather than a sudden and dramatic event.
It makes sense that they wanted to make it difficult to remove a sitting president.
Of course.
But, as you pointed out, it's not always a black and white situation.
Right.
There's no clear-cut test for determining exactly when a president is no longer fit to serve.
Right. It's a judgment call
Yeah.
that involves medical opinions, political considerations,
Uh-huh.
and let's be honest, a whole lot of subjective interpretation.
Exactly. That's a gray area, and that's why some folks have proposed alternative approaches.
Yeah.
One idea that's been floated is to create a nonpartisan commission
Okay.
of medical experts who would be responsible for assessing a president's fitness for office. The idea is that this commission could provide a more independent and objective evaluation,
Okay.
potentially minimizing the influence of political bias.
I can see some potential challenges there.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Well, for starters, who would appoint these experts?
Right.
And how would their assessments be used?
Uh-huh.
Could such a commission truly stay above the political fray?
Right, yeah.
Or would it inevitably become another battleground for partisan squabbling?
You're raising some excellent points.
Thanks.
Any system we design will have its own set of strengths and weaknesses.
For sure.
And it's crucial to carefully consider the potential unintended consequences.
Right. There's no easy fix.
So we're back to that delicate balancing act, aren't we?
It seems like it.
We're trying to find ways to protect the integrity of the presidency.
Yeah.
We're also ensuring that the country is being governed effectively. It's a tall order.
It is indeed, but I think the most important safeguard of all is an informed and engaged citizenry. A public that's actively involved, critically evaluates information, and holds its leaders accountable is essential for the health of any democracy.
Yeah, it all comes back to us, the voters.
It does.
We can't just sit back and be passive observers. We have a responsibility to stay informed, participate in the political process,
Yes.
and make our voices heard.
And that engagement shouldn't be confined to just showing up at the polls every few years.
Right.
It's about being active in our communities, advocating for policies we believe in,
Yeah.
and holding our elected officials' feet to the fire.
So it's not just about trying to figure out who's pulling the strings.
No.
It's about taking ownership of our democracy
Absolutely.
and shaping its future.
You've hit the nail on the head. We can't just be spectators in this grand experiment of self-governance.
Yeah.
We have to be active participants.
Right.
And that means being informed, engaged, and willing to hold our leaders accountable.
Okay, so to wrap things up, we've explored this whole president in name only concept, delved into the evidence presented in our sources, and even pondered the complexities of the 25th Amendment.
It's been quite a journey.
I'm feeling a bit more informed, but also a lot more aware of just how much I still don't know.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? The more we learn, the more we realize how much more there is to explore.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, we want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question to ponder.
Okay, shoot.
How can we ensure both a president's well-being and effective governance regardless of their age or health?
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a question that deserves ongoing dialogue, critical thinking, and a commitment to upholding the values that form the bedrock of our democracy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this exploration.
Yeah.
Keep those conversations going, and remember, the future of our democracy depends on all of us being informed, engaged, and active participants.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive, where we'll continue to explore the most fascinating and thought-provoking ideas of our time.